All right, well, why don't we get started? Good afternoon, everyone. You know, thank goodness we're doing this in the morning. It would be really unfortunate if at the end of the day, people have heard many talks and they're already kind of checked. Oh, wait, no, that's, okay, all right. So cybersecurity at the board level, that's the topic here. Thank you for everyone for joining us. We'll start with a few introductions. So I'm Sean O'Kelly. I'm the CEO for a company called Meetings and Events International. We are a healthcare marketing company, but I'm a technologist at heart, been a technologist for most of my career. So that's a little bit about me. Why don't we just go down the line and have everyone introduce themselves?
Sure. Hey, I'm Daniel Meyer. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for Morningstar. I started my career with a little detour through physics, kind of like Walter. We always have that in common. And apparently one more person. And I made it back to security after that. Worked in offensive security, pen testing for NCC Group for a while, and I'm now with Morningstar for about 3 years.
Nice. Robert Wagner. I'm a field CISO. Also started off my career as my first job in InfoSec was a third shift SOC analyst. So I've seen a lot. I'm also co-founder of a charity called Hack for Kids. We teach kids about internet safety, security, and ethics. Thanks all. And I'm also on the board of the ISSA Chicago chapter here.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dan Manley. I'm the CISO at CME Group. I did not start my career in physics, but I really like Big Bang Theory. Along my career, started out in the U.S. Air Force and spent many years in consulting with a heavy focus in financial services.
My name is Richard Russian. I'm CISO for Motorola Mobility. Have been the CISO now going on 16 years, so I've been around forever. I've done multitudes of several different startups, as well as worked for large, massive global corporations around the world.
All right. Great group, a very qualified group for sure, no question. So cyber resiliency at the board level. Part of what we hope to convey today is when, as complicated topics have to be communicated to other folks on the board, how do we do that? And how do we stress what's really important? How do we emphasize what's important now versus what might be important later? And what, so when you're communicating with a finance leader, a sales leader, an operations leader, a CEO, and you're a CIO or CISO, how do you do that in a way that's effective? And so part of what we hope to weave into the conversation is that theme, and that's kind of what the point of how you communicate to the board is. So a lot of folks on board, at the board level, if for anyone that has interacted with boards, most folks are finance people, and then you have other leaders with other backgrounds sprinkled in, but a lot of folks are finance people. So how they're looking at P&Ls, they're looking at balance sheets, they're looking at cash flow statements. How do you take that and craft messages that resonate with that group? So, but why don't we start just very fundamentally, what is cyber resiliency? So who'd like to start us off with that question? Let's start there.
I'll jump in. I think Walter in his presentation earlier today did a good job of helping to describe cyber resiliency. When I talk to executives, trying to make sure they understand that cyber resiliency is that focus around availability, reliability, and recoverability in the context of the security threats that the organization faces. You quickly get into a discussion of, well, isn't that DR and business continuity? You have to draw a distinction between operational resiliency. How do we keep the organization up, servicing our customers, doing that things that make money for us? And cyber resiliency, which is really about what are those threats that are going to target the organization to really have adverse impact. I spend quite a bit of time to help them understand that quite frequently a cyber incident for us is going to manifest itself as an operational incident. Helping them understand that it may take us hours or days to conclude that it's really a cyber attack, as we get into the worst case scenario, is usually pretty eye-opening for them. There is that misnomer that, well, as soon as it starts, you guys are going to know, right? And then they'll have it fixed before the end of the day. And so I think helping them to understand how to break it down into its components and be able to differentiate other terms they may hear across the organization is something that's proven helpful.
Yeah, I think it's to use an old quote, you know it when you see it. Resilience is one of the things. We've all experienced it, whether it's Okta outages or breach function, Microsoft's outages or breaches. Any one of those has always fallen into those areas. Even Amazon with their metrics for their billing function took whole cloud instances down. We've seen the resilience impact of now what? And everybody just stares blankly at the screen going, well, what are we going to do? And I think that's part of the issue, is that it is the plan of the unknown scenario as well as the known stuff that you actually have to have. There's not a lot of things that come into play in the resiliency area except for preparation. If you're not prepared, it's going to kill you. It's going to kill the business. It's going to kill the organization. Everyone's going to look on that. So being prepared is really the best part of that. It's been around for a while. World Economic Forum released a bunch of paperworks back in the around 2016 or so when they were talking about it, and they viewed it as this is a way to get people to go into cybersecurity and do it because the resiliency aspect that cybersecurity provides on that side of it. If I'm starting to look at this, I have to figure out if this breaks, what happens next. And I think that's part of the issues, is understanding all those potential points. And we did this when we had our exercise during the pandemic. It was like, now VPN access, which didn't used to be business critical, wasn't a resiliency factor. Now with everybody working from home, I took your 7 VPN concentrators around the world down, only 7 IP addresses that I needed to take offline. Does your business still work, or what you're left with? Oh, go into the office. Oh, we can't do that, it's closed. Now what? And those are kind of the next steps, that the 5 whys, the other side of it, that you really have to dig into as part of these resiliencies, because there's a ton of unintended consequences, but also the simple fact is you got to be prepared for all these things that come at you, whether it's third party, your internal side, attacker, nation state. Pick your choice of what you're supposed to do. Also look at your other issues, because you may have perfect cyber resiliency, but your third party that's doing shipping does not. So guess what? You're in the same bucket that you were before.
So let's talk. Nope, go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, that's one quick note. I think one thing is also that you have to, like, I guess that where you were getting at, you have to assume that something happens, right? That you have to plan for those events. But I think the other factor is, I hate to use this word again because everybody hates it, zero trust, right? You probably need to make sure that if something happens, it's contained. And so I think part of resilience is also that if you have an incident like ransomware or something like that, it doesn't affect the entire organization, but that you try to compartmentalize if possible so that you limit the impact and then can focus recovery on those parts of the business.
So let's talk about let's double click on this a little bit. Let's talk about the tools and mechanisms for how we, I mean, so you talk about risks and threats. How is that measured? How are those things identified? How are they cataloged? How are they communicated? Because that's really a big part of cyber resiliency, is in order to be prepared, that means that you have to have done the work on the front end to have the tools and the funding in place, and the processes and the policies in place to ensure that the right steps are being followed along the way, and then if something does happen, that the team knows how to react. So let's talk about how do you do that? How do you identify, catalog, communicate, the cyber threats?
Well, so I'd say first off, we suck at doing this, right? For a long time we've been trying to do it like on the matrices, right?
Classic matrix, right?
Yep. And who here has heard Doug Hubbard speak about this? Yeah, right. And one of the great things he points out is there's been several studies that show that using matrices to measure risk is often worse than doing nothing. Yeah, right? And it's just ridiculous. So what he and some other people, even Ed, who was up here previously as a speaker, Richard Rushing also, a lot of people, Doug Rush here, is even, they're all trying to apply in some ways, either probability or actuarial math to measure risk, which is such a good direction to take, because now we're talking in terms that the board understands, right? That's the kind of risk that they actually can connect with and digest.
Because if you're using probabilities, you're able to then kind of start to attach dollars to those probabilities, right?
Precisely,
Yeah,
yep.
right, yep.
There needs to be the secret decoder ring for executive level talk, which is usually dollar signs in most of the cases that's there.
And that's how you get, this is how you get to the, this is how you get to the finance leader, right?
Yeah.
Right here.
So, and I think that's one of the sides of it. And again, it's like the Matrix sees, I'm sorry, everything's always red. And if you're in a world where you have green or yellow, look closer, it'll be red. Or someone's lying to you on some numbers. It's that struggle, and you bring up, there I wouldn't say a wealth of tools, but it's back to the same thing. I want to put it back to connect the dots, because we brought up and we kind of glossed over like DR and business continuity. If you don't have that already outlined for a system you're trying to protect, well, step one, I can't recover, or I can't isolate, I can't contain if I don't have a backup or even know who's in charge of this. So you really have to have your house in order, but you already have those to say, okay, these are all covered, check. These are all covered, check. And it's back to the same thing. This needs to be things that are not covered, you haven't come to agreement on, need to be in the risk registry so the board can take action and goes, no, we've documented this, because it sucks when, oh, bad things happen and you're like, we documented this, and well, it was in an email to the CFO and he never ever read the document. So now you're in another discussion.
Do you tie it back to contracts too, customer contracts, whether they're SLAs or just missed revenue? Is there some of that too?
Simple things. So resiliency, incident notification, 48 hours to tell me you got a problem. I can tell you every customer that is in the news never tells you that in 48 hours, ever, that's there. But if it's in your contract, when you're renegotiating your contract, you now have some ammunition to use against them, but it's back to the same thing. Don't expect, just because it's written in a piece of paper, that it's going to be applied to that. Even we have indemnification, so yes, you go get breached, okay, liquidated damages, $5 million, because that was what we said was the amount of value of the data that you're storing. Write us a check.
Right.
Okay, you know that's not going to happen for another 4 or 5 years when all the dust settles.
And that's why most people think cyber insurance is about making the organization whole. Well, oftentimes it's actually about covering the cost of your missed SLAs to your customers, right?
Yeah, it's what's being damaged. So you're going to have to go into those areas, but it's not your wheelhouse. I'm not a finance guy per training or anything else that's there. So you've either needed to partner with people that are around that to do this. This is not just sits in a CISO or a CSO org's wheelhouse. You may be ultimately responsible for it, but it's a team that's made up of the entire organization structure to build that resiliency plan. You can start in an area and then expand out, but it's going to be the same thing. You need IT involvement. You need supply chain. All these different groups need to be brought together to understand what would it take to move a factory. In some cases, what would it take when the factory's flattened? How long is it going to take to be back up?
Right.
Is it months? Is it weeks? Is it years? What do I do with material that's in that factory? Because that's value. Now, oh yeah, you can ship it across the country. How and in what trucks? And this is billions of dollars of semiconductors and everything else that we're moving in a very strange way. Oh, we're not doing that ever. Then there's a different story to be had with that. But you really need to get the business aligned with the technical side of it, so that you understand what the next moves are.
So going back to the original question, and Dan, you look like you want to jump in. How do we catalog and identify these things, and how do we communicate them in a way that resonates?
So if you just listen to the conversation, you posed the question of how do we communicate that to
Yeah,
board?
right.
And we all talked, you have to have your ducks in a row.
Right.
right? You have to have facts, you have to understand your business environment, how you're measuring things, the ability to get to probability you can convert to dollars. So when you go talk to those executives or the board members, you can speak in terms and language that are relevant to them. Our board at CME Group is a large board. The head of our risk committee is a gold trader. And so he usually starts his questions with, I read this in the Wall Street Journal. I don't know what it means. Are we okay? And all he wants me to say is yes. And you,
There's only one right
Right?
answer.
There's only one right
Yeah,
And you
answer.
never say yes.
right? And so it's a matter of saying, well, what you need to understand about that article is this. Here are the steps we've taken around it. But I think it's all predicated on the fact of you've got all the pieces and parts across the organization, not just in cyber, and you've got to be able to bring those together into the story that you're able to explain to the members of the board in a way they understand. One other example, we had recently some of the articles around insider threat, right? Had a different board member, and she's like, well, do we monitor for that? And it's like, yes, I have an entire team that does that. I'll bring that presentation next quarter. She's like, seriously? I go, yeah, we do. And it's a factor of our disciplines can be so large, and we're so dependent on potentially other functions, whether it be physical security, depending on where DR and business continuity sit. We work and partner with them, and you need to be able to bring that holistic story in to help the board members understand the risk to the organization and what's being done to resolve it.
One of the coolest exercises I ever went through, I was working in a large financial, and they actually had all the business units come and present to IT and security combined on how the business operates. And what a fantastic thing that was to actually, I mean, how often do folks in our positions not, and certainly the people under us, not know how the business they're defending even works? To have those folks come in and tell them how the business works from their point of view really can help the practitioners then talk in their language.
No, that's great. Daniel, is there any, from your point of view at Morningstar, is there anything in particular that Morningstar is doing to catalog and identify and communicate risk?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everybody, what everybody has been saying around having a catalog and knowing what you have. So we have a system to track that, and we're tying it also how we manage our cloud accounts. So we don't have any physical things like Richard has to deal with. It's mostly software system and data. So what we have our organization structured in different technical services and business services, and we're tracking DR and resilience requirements based on those. And then we're having revenues tied to those, and we're reporting that to the board so that we can see which percentage of our revenue is covered with resilience, or DR in this particular instance. Very rough and high level metric, but sufficient for the board to see the trends and how things are going. I think what we're struggling with still is dependencies, because nothing is working independently, especially if you have a lot of central data like we have. One system depends on another. You have all these connections in the business. And it's really difficult to really disentangle that. And if something's down over here, it might have an impact over here. And that is difficult to communicate.
So let's jump to another part of this topic. So we were talking, Dan, you were mentioning earlier the difference between cyber resilience and operational resilience. Let's talk about how do we make that meaningful at the board level. So how do we educate the board? Some of it's education, right? Some of it is using real life examples and real life materials. So maybe give some examples of how each of you have gone about doing that. What type of example have you actually presented to a board that would be relevant to the group?
I can go ahead.
I'll start. Let no good issue go unfunctioned on that, because you have them. Resiliency is not about the enterprise always being flat. It could be about a group, an operation, a division, a server that becomes critical. We've done different things around that and showed things. And I think one of the things that's there is, just as you explained in the organization, what does finance do, and here is everything that they're done, but what does treasury do inside the group? What does accounts payable, accounts receivable? Oh, wow, there's all these groups. Same goes for a PC. It's like you have the networking team that makes the connections with that. They're part of this puzzle. You have the operating system team that deals with the OS that's on the system, making sure that that is patched. You have the application owners that are the application that's running on the server. There's 3 different people that are involved in the health of that system, and each one of those could have a resiliency impact that's based on it. So they need to be part of the conversation that's there and working together, but it's the same thing. And security is one of the things, self-inflicted wounds. We brought these up to cyber resiliency. Be careful what you bring forward, because if you bring forward too good of a case study, you now become the de facto case study that everybody is measured against. So we had a AV tool that we pushed out a new policy, and lo and behold, knocked about 4,000 people offline, 10 o'clock in the morning. Toosh, all gone. Whoops, okay, let's go fix that. Well, 20 minutes later, everybody's fixed and everything else. But that was a resilience to say that we impacted about 4,000 people in their ability to do their work with that. It was addressed within about 25 minutes till everything was there, but that period of window we brought up, which was good because they wanted to understand how we discovered it, why it happened, where, okay, everything was all laid out on the table. That's good, but they were more impressed that we were able to touch 4,000 machines and bring them back live in 15 minutes through a software config, which is great. Now their thing is it takes 15 minutes to do anything in the world to replace a system. And you're like, no, this is not what you should have learned from this. But it is one of the things that you're there is you've got examples of this. And the more you give a taste to the board or the audit committee or the senior leadership team, they're going to ask questions that are going to hone you for the next one. And you're going to find out what's really important to them. Like your question, he's going to ask the same question around gold every single time that's there. Why? Because that's what he does. And you're never going to change it.
Have any of you actually, in communicating some of those threats, or trying to educate the board in communicating some of that, have you ever been put on the spot? And
define on the spot
by the board and said, okay, tell us when this is going to be resolved. Tell us how you're going to resolve this and give me a date.
Yes.
Yes, I don't
So
think
what do
you
you- how do you
ever
do
leave
that?
a board
How do you
meeting
handle that
without an
scenario?
action item. I don't know. Does anybody, have ever left a board meeting without an action item in here?
Well,
No? Okay.
no, that's true. But the idea that you'd be put on the spot for a specific date, how do you handle that scenario? And
I
feel
know
free to
for-
jump in.
For
Anyone.
us, given the state of where cybersecurity has been over the last 5 years, I've been proactive that I go in and tell them, here's the problems, here's the plan to resolve it. As new topics and issues come up, we look at them and say, I don't have that date for you today, you'll have that date by the end of the week, and we'll follow up with board communication.
Okay.
Better that we take it that way than we promise a date that there's no way we can deliver against. Your question of how do we differentiate that for the board, I report to the CIO, but my materials are independent.
Right.
From a security perspective, my boss doesn't even look at my materials. I submit them through the corporate secretary. When we go in to present, he's in the room with me. And the same holds true for our operations representative. So as we get into discussions, we're able to point, and I'll get a question on operational resilience, and I'm able to point and say, that's really a question for this individual, and let them respond to help draw a greater delineation across all of our different functions. We also, with our board, have charters for what is cyber versus what is operational resiliency. They review those charters on an annual basis to sign off on them. And then additionally, we do annual training with our board members on topics that relate to cybersecurity. So we'll go in and talk about how we're doing threat intel, what is an incident, how do we test it, validate it, what are the scenarios we cover, to be able to help give them a broader base of knowledge to help us be more effective when we're communicating metrics or topical items that may come up through the Wall Street Journal, so that they have a base of understanding of what our current capabilities are.
Channel your best Scotty impersonation when you're getting this on that side of it. Give it time. I will say also, when you're asked on a spot like that, always point out that if you would like this, if we feel the need or the risk to do this faster, money and people do help. As that.
You got to be careful with that.
It is a
Might wanna be careful
landmine
with
that you
that
can
one,
step
but-
on that side of it that's there.
You have to read the room.
Yeah.
right?
Right,
Our risk
right.
committee, the CEO is sitting right there, so I'm not gonna ask for more money unless I've asked him directly.
Or your
Before I do
boss,
that through the rest
your
of the
boss
board,
is in
right?
the room and they're like, give him more money. And he's like, well, thanks for throwing me under the bus. on this
Right,
one."
right. People want to know about things in advance, so you don't want to be careful about riffing too much on the fly
Right.
with the CEO and the board in the room and all that, so. Robert, Daniel, either one of you want to jump in on
I mean,
educating the board and how you interact with the board?
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing is that, so I agree with that, like, I would probably commit to like a timeline to be presented at an earlier date and then figure out the rest from there. But I think what really helps, so we haven't done a tabletop exercise with our board, but they have recently asked for that, which I find great because we had really good success doing that with the executive team and all the other stakeholders, from sales to product owners to communications, legal, everybody being there. And when you do that and have them actually think through it, they understand more like what is actually asked of them, what are the actual things that are happening, and they're also, we will educate them on the vocabulary ahead of time so that they know if they hear about a cyber incident, what are the words you might hear, what is the decision they might be asked to do, and playing through that scenario, I think is a really good way of like getting them to think about it. One of our board members, she's on another board, and she's the cybersecurity expert on that board, which we are benefiting from.
I was
because
just going to
she's
ask
asking
that.
us
I was
these
just going to ask that.
tough
Do any of
questions
your
now.
boards have technical leaders, or is it mostly finance, operations, and sales leaders? 'Cause that's good if they have technical
we do
leaders.
have people who are from technical backgrounds,
Good.
but we don't designate experts on our board.
Okay.
It's not something we do in any of the subject matter areas.
Okay.
And I'd have to agree that tabletop exercises are one of the better ways to do this, especially when you see the board run into, I don't know the answer to that question, right? Making them think through that does so much to change the discussion.
No, and like I said, it's one of the things that things can appear as something else and then translate into cyber. So as it's nice and balmy, 80 degrees outside and bright sun is shining, everybody remembers anybody that had a data center in London last year during the summer heat waves. Okay, is that a physical security incident? Is that a cyber incident where we're having to shut down a whole entire data center because we're not going to get power and it's going to brown out? Wow, I got no one to blame for that, except, well, we put too much density or they put too much density. And so you're in a hard situation that some of these things are not necessarily your responsibility, but it translates back into that. So you're going to be the tag leader in most of the cases that it is involving computer equipment in one way, shape, or form. It's going to be part of that. If you're doing people, you can escape that one typically. But there's some of these that are, hey, if it's an application, it's this, it's okay, you're in the middle of this. So you're either taking a leadership role or you're the target focal point on that's there. So even if it's not what you're trying to do, you're going to be asked to either lead, just like an incident response process that's there, you're going to be the one that's going to be tasked with leading this. And that sometimes is, I didn't do this, it's not my mess to clean up, and you're stuck. Because somebody asked you either from senior leadership or they figured that you were the person that knew most about it. And
right.
they'll give it to you.
Well, let's do one more question, then we want to leave 5 minutes for a little bit of Q&A. So last question, whoever wants to jump in, and we'll get point of view from everybody. Just tell us something new, creative that you're doing today that you can share with the group. If you can't share them, that's a different thing. But
So one thing that I've been seeing, just starting to rise amongst various security practitioners, is the whole concept of using chaos engineering for security. So it's well established for the IT part of the world, especially for cloud environments. The introduction of security chaos engineering is really cool, and I think a really better way to test that resiliency than sort of the disaster recovery business resiliency that we've done in the past. So I'd like to see more along this line, but and for those of you that aren't familiar with chaos engineering, so Netflix was a big proponent of it, and literally they just break shit, and then you'd have to deal with it, right? You'd bring down a whole AWS zone, and the company had to recover from it. The same thing happens in chaos engineering for security, but instead we're injecting faults, risk-driven fault injection is a concept that you can Google to get more on it, but there are automated tools now to inject the faults and then test for those faults to help improve your resiliency. I love this idea.
That's great. 30 seconds to 1 minute. Everyone else, tell us something new.
I mean, for me, it's really about the reporting and tying technology and business together, and getting that mapping done between which technology supports which part of the business and getting the ownership right, and then you can have much better accountability for resilience and and to determine impact in case something happens to that particular piece of technology. And we're working through that process of establishing those maps, and we have buy-in from finance and other departments, so that's really like a cross-functional initiative, which is fun.
So we have a really large board. We have a lot of regulatory requirements. So what we've actually done is created what I refer to as a storyboard. So there's a standardized set of topics that are going into each quarterly meeting. And we actually presented that to the board and said, at a minimum, we're going to bring this to you. Are there other things you're interested in? So we can get kind of some voice of the customer back and say, I'd really be interested in this topic. And so we start with that storyboard, and we figured out what can go in appendix versus what we want to spend time on. But then we can supplement that with topical items that may be coming up over time. And it's really helped the risk committee and the broader board understand the things that we're really dealing with, from what's our strategy, what's the size of the team, financials, all the way through when are we actually doing our third-party test, when are they going to see the results. We can lay that out for them so they know what to expect.
And there's obviously a lot, that's great, there's obviously a lot of information out there about the power of storytelling, right?
Yeah.
So that is a good way, a very good way to communicate.
No, I second the storytelling. If you can't drive a story, it may be Mother Goose, Jack and the Beanstalk, or the latest, greatest Tom Clancy spy novel that you're going to tell a story about, but it needs to be a story. I think one of the things that it was mentioned down here, I think is really important that we started that as part of this cyber resiliency journey, is doing tabletops with all the different groups to go in and not managed by anybody else, just asking the questions. Tell us what will stop your side of the business from working on that. And it's really fascinating because you'll find out this server under someone's desk over here will shut down the legal department if you do not, if it ever turns off or anything else. Or no one is getting paid anywhere in the world if this goes down. You need to find where those exist. And sometimes those are, everybody knows about it, and sometimes the people know about it and are not really vocal to tell because they're like, we're trying to get rid of this, but we still haven't either got funding or it's too hazardous to move kind of scenarios with that. And I think doing those tabletops gets you a bunch of different pieces of data that you can all merge together.
That's
and get
great.
a much better story around the enterprise cyber resiliency instead of just what my view on the cyber resiliency is going to be.
That's great. A lot of great examples and information. Thank you, everybody. So we've got just a couple minutes now. I think we want to do take
Some Q&A.
Take a couple
Yep.
questions.
Thank you. So I know right now a lot of boards are quite concerned about the economy, and they're putting a lot of pressure and scrutiny on the C-suite to scale back investments. And traditionally, cybersecurity is something that you don't scale back. I'm just curious, are your boards placing like a similar level of scrutiny, and are you feeling any pressure to scale back any investments on your top cybersecurity programs, or do you still feel like you're getting the investment that you would like?
I have not. I think the direction is to spend money wisely, but we have not had any cuts or any scale backs.
Yeah, I think from spending, your investments are not nearly as much as they were pre-COVID and during COVID side of it that's there. But again, it's back to the same thing. Is this a 2-quarter issue? This is going to be a multi-year issue? That's the board's having that version of it that's actually there. But I think it's going to happen, right or wrong. If your business, and I've tagged things to revenue before for budget and everything else, and it sucks when the revenue declines because guess what? You signed up for this. Guess what? Your budget's going to get hit just like everybody else's because you signed up to say, hey, if we grow, I want to grow fast. And okay, but that's the risk of doing that. So I think it's one of the things. I don't think you're going to see that much first couple of quarters, but if this continues on further past that, you're going to see substantial de-investment into a lot of organizations that are like, can you stretch this out, move it to next year kind of scenario with that. just to do things. And it depends on the industry. I make 3% off of every product I make. That's not a huge thing. So that impacts us dramatically in a lot of cases on that side.
Pressure, yes, not from the board, from finance, right there, to your point of, you're trying to get.
When
ahead
have
of
they
that,
not twisted your arm?
Right, we discussed in preparing, discussion with the CFO, he thinks I've gold-plated everything, right, but, we're having trade-offs.
Probably not wrong. He's probably not wrong.
Well,
It's
so-
silver, it's silver, I tell you.
I'm gonna take Richard's comment, not to let a good crisis go to waste, which is, they came and they said, hey, can you reduce your pro fees? Sure, if you let me go hire this number of people in this location, I'll give you 80% of that pro fee back. Or if I give this back to you now, that's fine, but if we see these factors unfold through our metrics, I don't care whether I have the budget or not, I'm gonna go hire those consultants to come in and help supplement the staff. And they understand those trade-offs, and we document those risks as we go through it. We have to, security in the past, we had very open checkbook, right? We're much more now trying to fall in line with the other parts of technology to make sure we're being good corporate citizens and how we spend our resources.
I know we're at time. Do we want to take one more question?
Okay, so this is more of a people question. So as you prepare to present to the board, what is the process of, or do you take time to get to know the board members to anticipate the questions they may ask? So do you basically prepare to kind of like get to know them by, if you don't know them already, like go onto their LinkedIn profile to kind of get a glimpse of where they're coming from and any questions that you can anticipate, right, before you meet with the board? How do you prepare to get to know them? That's the question. So
Yeah,
that's more of a people question.
I can share, right, we use all sources available to learn, and that may be reaching out through my professional network to understand some of the new board members. But then additionally, when we have we have a risk committee, which is the designated committee of our board for cyber. Anybody new that gets assigned to that committee, we have an orientation with them. And we go sit down for an hour and a half and walk them through our program, and we get a dialogue and a rapport going. We walk them through that storyboard to help them understand and have a base of knowledge. It affords us the opportunity just for me to give them my number to say, if you have a problem or a question, you can call me directly. But it just helps make it a lot easier when we get in those structured settings to present, that we're not just getting the, I don't understand any of this. What are you talking about? So we make an investment up front to educate them outside of that broader meeting, just so things go smoother.
I think it's a good, stock them. No, not really. But I think it's one of the things.
It's a fine line. Threat
it's a fine line.
intel,
It's a fine line
stalking.
on that.
I
When you,
had my threat intelligence team do a whole dossier on that.
yeah, when you show up to their thing and your tea time is 15 minutes before their tea time, that becomes a little questionable on that side of it that's there. But no, I think it's really important, and it's not just for boards, it's for audit committee, SLT, and everything else. And most of the time, if you're coming in for the first time, you have a mentor or somebody that can do that. You can ask for the introductions or ask them to, is it okay if you introduce yourself to them and ask them if you have questions? Because you'll find that some of them love to talk about cybersecurity. Some of them were like, that's technical stuff and don't talk to me ever about this again because it's scary and I don't want to know about it. So I have a person on my board that was part of the PlayStation data breach and lived through that. So you want to go present on a breach and they're like, oh, if you think this is bad, let me give you, and you're like, oh, not you. But those are things that we'll run into that you have no idea what their experience is or what other boards they're members of that come back. But offering your expertise to them and asking if there's any questions, you can do a deep dive or some of the other stuff, is a good olive branch to hand off to folks to say, hey, I'm not here to scare you or pull the wool over your eyes or try to get you to spend money. I'm here to make the company a safer place. Tell me your thoughts on that side of it that's there. And they'll provide good feedback in a lot of cases, but you'll know who are your strong and weak points. And then some people are focused on privacy, some people are focused on data sovereignty. In our board, we have a bunch of people, and it's language barriers in some cases that are there. So you have to be cognizant of that. I may not ever reached all the board members because I have to have an interpreter that's talking between me, and that's kind of an awkward situation.
there are times you need to be a bit assertive. Like some of the audit committee members only want to talk to finance or internal audit. And those folks aren't always equipped to be able to give the full story. So there's been scenarios where I've had to track down the audit chair and say, I understand you had a question. What can I answer for you?
If you do an audit, make it a lunch at a really expensive restaurant over the per diem amount and make them pay.
But I think the informal setting definitely is helpful. Like our board is fairly informal, which is very, very nice. And I've been invited to board dinners and other things, and getting people to know on a more personal level in that environment is really helpful because you can learn about their backgrounds and what their perspectives are. And they might also ask you more candid questions than they would ask in the boardroom on record. So that's been really helpful. So I think it's important to get to know them at least somewhat on a personal level.
All right, I think we are definitely slightly over time, so thank you, everyone. Thank you to the panel.